Vashti, thank you for joining us. I have to admit, this is going to be an unusual Panthers kind of interview because it seems like everything coming out of joint practices today is kind of good vibes and they played well, which is something new over the last 11, 12 months of just good vibes. Is that what you're taking away from today, that for the most part it's good news?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been to this is the fourth joint practice. I was in Indy. I went to New England and the Jets last year, and each of those were precursors for what we could expect during the regular season. I'm not saying that's the case here, but it was not what I've seen in previous joint practices. The offense was able to efficiently move the ball. We saw some chunk plays by Bryce Young. We saw some scores by Bryce Young. So all in all, I think that the team and fans should be happy with what they were able to produce today.
What about maybe the other side of the ball? And I know from checking out your website, Carolina Blitz, one of the players you were really excited to see in the joint practices was J.C. Horn. How did he fare against, obviously, Rodgers and Garrett Wilson in an offense with some names?
Yeah, Rodgers is Rodgers. He was able to dice up the defense some. But J.C. was on a snap count, so he didn't play. He played sparingly, especially in the 11-on-11 drills. I had to split my time between offense and defense. So the first portion of practice, I was watching offense, and then the second, I watched the defense. Unfortunately, when defense was on the field, while I was watching, JC he was not playing at that point, so he had limited snaps. But on the defensive side, it wasn't as positive as the offense, but it wasn't terrible. So you had Trevin Wallace, a rookie who was able to pick off Aaron Rodgers in the red zone. I think Aaron threw about 3 picks today, but they were able to move the ball against the Panthers defense. It's important to note Clowney wasn't playing. Dane Jackson, their other anticipated starting corner opposite JC, is injured as well. So they were without a couple of pieces on that defense that you would expect them to have during the regular season. So it's important to note that. But Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers, and so it wasn't like, the Panthers defense was able to really shut that Jets offense down. But we don't really care about the defense, do we? What we care about is that offense, because they have been putrid the last few years, and it was very positive today.
Vashti Hurt, editor-in-chief of Carolina Blitz, joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline here on The Drive with Tim Donnelly. Do you know what happens to Mingo and Marshall Jr. on game day? Because I keep hearing how great they are in camp. I keep hearing how they made plays today, but then obviously in preseason game 1, and we go back to last year, they've struggled to make plays once they're in the stadium with the game lights.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I'm going to give Mingo a pass. Mingo was a rookie. Mm-hmm. Mingo was a part of that terrible offense, and nobody looked good last season, right? So I'm gonna give Mingo somewhat of a pass. Terrace Marshall has had trouble finding his footing. The best that he's looked was actually when Steve Wilks took over, and they were running the ball and kind of opened up things for the offense. That's the best he's looked, but he hasn't really had a lot of time on the field. He's flashed in training camp. Right now, at this point, it's a toss-up whether he makes the 53-man roster. But I think that you got to kind of wash away last season. So Mingo, I'm going to give a pass, but he worked out with Steve Smith during the off season. He seems to have a renewed confidence, and I think that everybody is benefiting from a fresh start with a new coaching regime, a new scheme, and less expectations on them. And I think that also is another thing that'll bode well for the Panthers heading into this regular season. But you're right. I mean, they have to show us that during the regular season on game day. And so thus far, we haven't seen it. But, Mingo hadn't really looked as good as he's looked this training camp, even last last year during training camp and even during OTAs. So that might be a good sign. But, Deontay Johnson is going to be the man for this team. Adam Thielen will probably be number 2. And depending on how Xavier Legette looks, he'll probably be number 3. Mingo and Terrace Marshall, depending on, if Terrace makes the team, those would be guys who would be wouldn't be main targets, but would have to make plays as well.
Was there anything you felt you still want to see, right? Because obviously these teams joint practice today, and then they face off in the preseason in week 2. Is there something you're still itching to see or get your eyes on for this weekend?
I don't expect the starters to play this weekend, not with as many snaps as they had. So I don't think fans should get their hopes up for that. I guess maybe some of the backups. I think that there's a lack of depth along. The offensive line talent falls off once you get past that first group. And so, historically and with really all teams, you're only as good as your last offensive lineman, because inevitably one of those guys is going to get hurt. So I'm curious to see how that second and third string offensive line, how those guys are able to play. They're banged up in the secondary. There's a guy who played at South Carolina who's still on the market, and fans are asking about whether the Panthers will plan to sign him. With Dane Jackson out, I think that Dan Morgan should make that call. I think he does make that call, and maybe talks ramp up with that. But outside of that, you got to see where your depth is in that secondary. Some of those guys are going to have to step up, with Jackson being sidelined for, I believe, potentially 6 weeks. And that goes into the regular season. So who's going to be your opposite corner, a corner opposite of J.C. Horn? And then you mentioned the wide receivers. Deontay Johnson is day-to-day. I would anticipate that he'll be ready week 1. And then Adam Thielen. But, Xavier Legette did not get any targets. He really didn't play in 11-11 today. Who's going to be that third guy who's going to step up and be the option for Bryce?
And just so everybody is kind of picking up what Vashti is putting down, that player that played at South Carolina she mentioned is Stephon Gilmore, who a lot of I think fans want to see back in Carolina. Old high school teammate and college teammate of Jadeveon Clowney, so I'm sure he's laying on the recruiting. Vashti Hurt, editor-in-chief of Carolina Blitz. Before we let you go, one more. I need some more specifics on Bryce. Everyone I talk to just wants the hype, or it's either the sky is falling Chicken Little, or he's going to be the next big thing. Based on today, which direction is he moving, and what specifically did you see from him that makes you think that way?
He's definitely trending in a positive direction. I liked he was accurate on his deep throws. I liked his movement out of the pocket. Once he was able to get out of the pocket, and this is what he did in Alabama. Those kind of off the cuff throws, those throws where he's forced out of the pocket and he makes something happen. We haven't really seen that. We didn't see that last season. We didn't see that in training camp last year. I saw that today. It seems like he is getting back to what he is good at. And, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid yet. So I don't want, this is probably the best practice I've seen that he's had all training camp. It just happened to be against one of the best defenses. So I think that's a great thing. But when it comes to Bryce Young, he seems more comfortable in front of the media. He's talking more to teammates. He's embracing that leader role as a professional. So I think he's trending in a positive direction. You just hope that translates during the regular season. But so far, if we're going based on what we saw today, Bryce is on an upward trajectory.
That's what they want to hear. Vashti, we appreciate you for stopping in, giving us the insight, and we'll continue following along at Carolina Blitz.
All right. Thanks for having me.